Thank you for joining. Yeah, we don't have to make big announcements right now. But yeah, thank you for joining, and we really appreciate you all joining despite of busy schedules at your end for this kind of final in the series on the cross-regional conversation among our regions and the work that you all have been doing. So today what we will basically do is to reflect on what has been the learning so far. And that will be the focus moving forward and in the conversation. So thank you for joining everyone. And next slide. Yeah, so yeah, we do continue joining us in the social media with this hashtag. So Ubuntu Symposium in English and Symposio Ubuntu in Spanish. So if anyone you are tweeting or anyone following and for the session today, we have our regional representatives from all the 6 different regions together with us here. And you can see their pictures and names and their titles in the screen. While you see that, what we want to do is to invite all the speakers to also start introducing themselves. Yeah, so to request the speakers to introduce yourself, say hello in your own language, and introduce as you would like you to be introduced. So yeah, should we start with, as we see in the screen, Craig? Would you like to go first?
Sure, I'm happy to. It's a delight to be joining everyone this morning, U.S. time. I am Craig Norberg Bohm. I'm an operations administrative coordinator for the North American MenEngage network that encompasses Canada and U.S. Network for MenEngage Alliance. And terrific to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Over to you.
Sorry, it looks like Lakshman might have gone out again. So if we just do, I think Kevin is, so we'll do Kevin and then Samita and then Shay. So Kevin, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks a lot. So hello, everyone. I bring greetings from the Caribbean. I'm in Trinidad and Tobago. I am from the MenEngage Regional Network in the Caribbean, which is the Caribbean Male Action Network, CARIMAN. Really excited to be here as well as we come to the end of closer to the end of the symposium, and we're just reflecting on all the learnings and the opportunities and challenges. Great to be here.
Hi, I'm Samita. I represent South Asia as the regional coordinator for MenEngage South Asia. It's a very, it had been a great experience coming along with the Ubuntu Symposium for the last, more than 6 months, I think. It's 8 months maybe. And it had been lot of learning and lot of discussions, lot of new dialogues, which we have been kind of, engaging and enjoying. And of course, as a region, it had brought us a lot of experiences, which we would be sharing today. So it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Shay Franklin. I'm one of the co-coordinators from MenEngage Europe, and I work with the Men's Development Network here in Ireland. My individual work is with what I've come to describe as old men like myself. Looking back over the past year of the impact of COVID, one of the things that has been a real boon and positive part of it is, in fact, the participation in the Ubuntu sessions. They've been a stepping stone through the months, and have been really supportive of myself and some of my colleagues. So thank you, and it's good to be here today with you all.
Great, thank you. I think Lakshman is back with us. Yes.
Yeah, great. My apologies. The internet is, kicking me on and out again. So I just got a message from Hassan that he's about to join as well. But thank you for your introducing yourself. And for the next round, over to you, Bianca.
Okay, great. So like we had said, basically what we're sort of doing in this session today is just having a look at the impact of COVID on our ability to strengthen the networks, engage with our members, etc. And so the flow will be, hopefully, what we would like is kind of a dialogue. So I will sort of bring in the first question. Samita, Shay, you can just share to that question. And then, let me just see. We've got Jose Alfredo, Craig and Samita. Great. Anyway, we're having technical challenges, so please just bear with us for today. Sorry, so here we go. Craig and Samita are with us right now. So what we'll do, I'll bring in the first question, speak to the first question, but then also feel free, like if something comes up for you from what the other person has said, or if there's just a specific question you have in mind that you'd love to hear about, bring that in as well and just have a dialogue, and we'll just watch the flow of the time, etc. But keep it going. So the first sort of reflection, I guess it is really, is around the key learnings and the insights that we have gained, and what you have gained really through COVID-19 in terms of the ability to strengthen the networks, to build relationships, to reach out to members, etc. And so it would be great to hear from you sort of what you think has worked and you want to do more of that, what you think hasn't worked so well, so perhaps that's kind of in the future maybe either do less of or just stop altogether. And then what are those things that have been kind of okay and maybe they're worth keeping and discussing and looking into further, and maybe you're not sure at this point. So Samita, if I could start with you, and then we can jump over to Craig. That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. I think I mean, just to start from where we are at this very moment in terms of COVID, South Asia is badly hit, and most of the countries in South Asia are under either total or partly in lockdown, and the daily increase of cases of COVID and the number of deaths are also increasing. So I mean, like it's a very concerned situation at the moment. But I think just to look back the last 8 months, of course, we were like, the whole world experienced COVID since the beginning of 2020, at which time we actually, gathered together to organize Ubuntu Symposium in Rwanda. So that was a very kind of, we were all very enthusiastic, and we actually wanted to have the, physical gathering at Rwanda, and all the plans were set. And it was, I mean, the planning itself was a great experience, great learning, where, we had a lot of opportunities to reflect back and, learn from the earlier symposiums, and bring those learnings also to kind of, like learnings from the Delhi symposium. It was kind of, like we had a lot of things that we wanted to do differently than in Delhi. So that was the most important part. But of course, those excitement didn't lasted long, because we were all hit, and of course in USA where you are stationed, it was badly hit, and we actually had to immediately think of different alternative way of bringing people together, and to keep the momentum and keep the same enthusiasm as it is, even though we wanted to have it as an online kind of a symposium. But I think I wouldn't, for any matter, I wouldn't say that it was good that we were able to do it online. But there were a lot of, because as humans, I think we always urge for human relationship, urge for human, face-to-face meetings and discussions, and even reflections, where even as a movement which is concerned about people, concerned about each other. I mean, Ubuntu itself is that, that mutual connection and mutual relationship that we are talking. So I would never say that the online was better than face-to-face meeting, but given the situation as it was, I think when we were getting people registered for the online symposium, just before November, to see that the interest coming from all over the world, the number of people registering amidst of the COVID situation, and different countries facing different stages of COVID. We would say the first wave, the second wave, and each part of the world was facing different. It's facing it in a different manner. So amidst of that, I think the number of people who are showing interest to join in and share, be part of the learning process and share their learnings, share what they have been doing at their own corners, and just to be part of this whole I don't know, like something like a movement, family. So it had been quite experience, even though happened online. And for sure, I know that looking at the number of sessions that we had for the last 8 months, it was like enormous. And sometimes people might have thought that it's too much, but still we saw that although we might not have actual participants coming into the Zoom now, but we have seen that a lot of people are very keen to even look at the YouTube videos, going back to the sessions and learn from the sessions and use the sessions as their, link it to their current work. And it had been like, so much of virtual learning. And I think when we are part of this learning circle, sometimes I have to be very honest that sometimes we have felt that we actually forget about the pandemic out there. And we become part of something else where we are so much concerned about each other. So for the moment, I'll stop there and take it from there later. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Samita. Craig, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I echo a lot of what Samita is saying in terms of the journey. It's been a journey. And both from the initial launch of the idea of a Ubuntu Symposium and then continue to transform it because of COVID lockdown to an online format is a huge endeavor. And I applaud everyone for it. The impact has been both positive ups and downs. It's been ups and downs to make this work. I mean, in the U.S., it's been strongly hit. We had a political leader who trivialized it and made it as if it were not important, and promoted misinformation. And so both had a strong programming challenge. It impacted impacted how we talk to kids. It impacted what are we influencing with regard to masculinities. Here we are talking about masculinities. It happened to have a strong message within that sphere in the US. And other countries, I suppose, would have experienced similarly if you had leaders that were operating that way as well. But that within the actual networking pieces, we operate the North American region online primarily anyway. We were learning to use Zoom. All of our coordinating meetings were online with Zoom already. So what this does is put us to a new level of operating with these tools. We've learned these tools, we've become comfortable with these tools. This is the positive thing about COVID required us to do it. It wasn't just something we did because we were separated by geography, which we were, and that we then were influenced to put on our own symposium in that we operated post the global to regional. And it was very successful from our point of view. We increased our membership, we increased conversation, we increased participation. The silver lining was there, that we knew we were not going to be in person. So we never considered it by that stage. And then having support from the global financially and technically and collaboratively, it made some things possible, and that we may not have thought about if we had not been dealing with this COVID environment. So the silver lining is really there. The horrible piece of just living with COVID, being in lockdown, having our concerned about our loved ones, has been the hardest part of COVID. How do you operate when you're worried all the time? And so the mental health piece is very substantial, and so I think this is really the experience of COVID and networking, is how do you Every time we met, we say, how's it going with COVID? Where you are? How's your family? So we are always, we were connecting that way routinely, and we continue to connect that way routinely. And it's, so that's an impact of COVID in our work, because we just cannot ignore it. And you know, now in the U.S., people are trying to throw it away. Okay, we're out of it now. The vaccines are a lot of places, but we're really not. We, you know, a lot of serious things surfaced. You know, our conservative political spectrum was strengthened in the COVID era in the United States. And so, and then it connects to the masculinities picture. Of course, this is again the programmatic politics of the work are pretty significantly impacted here, and it becomes controversial in a way that's hard to comprehend if you think it through. Why is this controversial? Why is public health controversial? And so, but it tied into it's male weak. It's male weak. It's weak to be COVID responsive in certain circles. You know, families don't talk to each other they have different sides of the spectrum. And so it has still has a programming component that has some handles on it. Like opposed to that, being mad about that, being mobilized about that is an opportunity in some respects. So it's perhaps a silver lining also. So that's where I'll leave it there. But there are two sides of this when it comes to COVID, and it's a substantial journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just with life, there's two sides to it, and there's definitely been some good, and there's been some things that have challenged us. Samita, do you want to say anything to that, to jump into anything that Craig has said, or share anything more that's come to your mind?
Well, just to add, you know, like we always talk about how to adjust to the new normal, and which is of course confusing for me all the time. What actually is the normal, and which is new normal? And we are every day it becomes very challenging for us, and I think we will have to create that the new normal situation day by day, without, you know, kind of looking way ahead of future and see, you know, imagine of a day that everything will be fine. But I think we as an alliance has now learned a lot how we are going to manage, or how we are going to be connected to achieve our common goals in a situation like this. So that is the most important learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, anything else you want to add?
Well, it occurs to me, and adding to that, that the thinking about returning to face-to-face meetings is another new journey. How do we do that, and do we want to? I mean, we've learned to be comfortable with this, but that it's not, as you mentioned, Samita, there's something human about connecting. We do want to be in a space together. It's going to be relishing the casual conversation and spending time sharing our expertise and our experiences and our dreams and our passions in a way that's not little boxes on a screen. It's going to be, and I can only hope and have optimistic that this time will come, that we will get this under control worldwide. But that connects to how do we network? And maybe we'll always, you know, certainly foreseeable future, we will be using this tool, and it has increased participation in its own way. So.
Yeah, I think that's really part of it, and it almost, what it feels like is that this idea that you mentioned, Samita, of like creativity, that we're going to get to create this new way of being, right? And even you, Craig, saying like, how are we going to meet each other in person? So there's like this opportunity to create something new. And what it makes me think also is that to do that, we need to take the time to reflect. Like, we need to have conversations like this. We don't always think that they're important because we think we need to be doing and moving and changing and making things happen. But actually, especially, I feel like at this time after COVID, and we're not even, I say after COVID, but it's not even, as you're saying, Samita, it's not close to after COVID. No. It's like, so as we need to take the time to slow down as well, because things are changing so quickly. And if we're just reacting, we're kind of never really putting our 2 feet on the ground, thinking about it, thinking about what's going to be the right thing. What are the silver linings, and what are those things that aren't really working for us? So I think if it's okay with you, I'm going to hand over to Lakshman to bring in the rest of the speakers, and then we'll come back to you in a few minutes. Thank you so much.
That's good.
Great, thank you. That's an amazing start. So now I would like to bring Kevin, Say, and Hassan to the screen, or to the fore, or to the table, however we would like to understand it, for a similar conversation. So we heard from Samita and Craig about some of the things that they found positive and what really worked and what has been the silver lining, but also what didn't work for you in your region. So, and then before that, I wanted to invite Hassan as well, so that you can also introduce, which the rest of us have done it. So introduce yourself as well before you start. So yeah, can we start with you, Hassan, if you are there? So while he unmutes, he is in Mozambique. No, not Mozambique. Where are you, Hassan?
Malawi.
Malawi.
Malawi. Yes.
Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, depending on where you are. My name is Hassan Sekajolo. I am the proud outgoing chairperson for the Africa region. We are having elections tomorrow to get the new leadership for MenEngage Africa. We are here in Malawi. We are having some network challenges. So if I get off, please find another way of contacting me, because I may continue talking and yet I'm off. The meeting we have here has got challenges of connectivity. Our colleagues joining the meeting online have found difficulties. So I hope my connection can sustain my presentation. For me, COVID and network strengthening that we're talking about, I just have one word. It's been so trying. It's a trying moment for us. Why is it a trying moment for us in the African region? Number one, I'll not talk about connectivity issues because that is understandable. The infrastructure on the continent, in the region, is not that very well developed. Even where you have internet connection, then you have issues of speed. So it's been a trying moment for us to run the Ubuntu Symposium online. Has really, really been a trying moment. But also, it's new behavior that people had to put within their work ethic of doing things online. So sometimes people would tell you that they would join online and they just don't join. Sometimes people would tell you they're available, they confirm everything, and they just don't appear. Okay? A good example is this particular session here. Get confirmations from people, everything, and last minute, people are unable to join. So people need to learn that new behavior of working online. People also in our part of the world, sustaining an online intervention or a meeting or a webinar would mean two things. Either you go somewhere where you can get good network, and in that place you cannot be there after a certain time, because then either the owners will lock up the place, so it is very trying for us. Other people would tell us, I can only go to the UN office. That is where I can get reliable internet to be able to connect. But then I have to follow the laws of the UN office, because they'll close office at a certain time. Those were our friends in West Africa. So it's been a very trying moment for us to get people to participate, to mobilize people, to follow the Ubuntu Symposium, to be able to support themselves, for example, because in Africa, internet is not everywhere. In other parts of the world, you can find internet everywhere, good speed, reliability, everything is okay. But in this part of the world, you have to pay for internet. You have to pay for the service. So people would say, now, are you paying for my internet connection? Oh, no, you have to join by yourself. They say, okay, I'll see if I can get money, then I'll be able to connect. So that is why we have had a lot of last minute cancellations of people who have said, I'm available, I'll speak, I'll do this. Then in the last minute, people are saying, sorry, I'm not able to join. I did not get enough money to sustain an internet connection. So it's been very trying for us. But nonetheless, there's been a lot of learning. There's been a lot of learning in relation to network strengthening. One of those learning is that when you work horizontally, okay? When you work horizontally, you have an opportunity of bringing in so many people into the intervention. So many people get to participate when you work horizontally. Horizontally meaning you are asking everybody to tell you how they want to participate. Okay, so the countries, our country networks had to write back to tell us how they want to participate as a country in the processes of Ubuntu Symposium. And this was after they have had their country meetings and have discussed this and deliberated it and come up with a plan that for us, this is our plan, and this is the best way we think that we will have participated as a country in the processes of the Ubuntu Symposium. So that's a big learning, that when you work horizontally, it's more like the format of co-creations, okay? People get to participate and you get to get a lot of input. One of the things we have learned is that we have a lot of untapped potential, a lot of knowledge is out there. The Ubuntu Symposium has shown us that there's so much knowledge out there on the African continent. People are doing amazing things, and this knowledge needs to be managed. We need to do some kind of knowledge management because there's just so much knowledge. Listening into country Ubuntu Symposium, because each of the African countries did a chapter of a symposium. Listening into these country chapter symposiums, looking at the lineup of speakers that the country symposium has got, okay, reading the reports from this symposium has really opened doors that we need to seriously start to think about how do we manage this knowledge. We need to invest in knowledge management and building those knowledge practices. One of the things the symposium is bringing for us is that now we know that we have lots of resource people to fall back to. Our country networks use the opportunity of the symposium to get deeper into women's rights organizations, into feminist organizations, to cultivate those relationships with the academia, okay? To open up those spaces for the country networks to know we can learn from here, we can learn from here, we can learn from here, because they had to go out and invite these people into the country symposiums. So that working horizontally in the process has taught us that please invest in knowledge. It has also helped us to know that there's such a huge community of practice that we can harness, be able to move on with. Okay, it has also opened doors. It has opened doors for solidarity with women's rights organizations. So for me, those are for me that is what has worked well in terms of strengthening the networks. Okay, but also improving on our own, aims and ambitions and targets and the things that we want to do as the MenEngage network. So,
thank you.
We need to be able to now say, now, how do we move forward? What do we take forward here? What are the things that we need to keep and continue to practice? And I'll talk about those ones later. So,
sure.
We are also learning that working with, I had Craig talk about it and Samita, working with the online platforms. We have to be honest, this was not the culture before COVID, okay? But now we are learning that, okay, you can pull off many things using an online meeting if you plan it very well. If you plan it very well, you can pull it off and you can get many things done. For example, we always struggled with the issue of how do we do sub-regional forums? How do we congregate in sub-regions? Before then, we would think that, oh, we need to call all the sub-regions into one meeting in one country. And that's what the thinking would do. But right now, having learned from the bottom-up mobilization approach for the symposium, then we are like, but we can also have a sub-regional meeting online and talk to all the country chairpersons and talk to all the coordinators and talk about governance issues and talk about how to strengthen the network in the sub-region. So you see, so that learning also came up, and we did ride on it right away. And we've been having sub-regional meetings, country networks in West Africa. We have a meeting and we talk about governance issues. We talk about strategic partnership issues within their sub-region. We talk about improving policy environment within sub-region. And then we are like, okay, obviously this was not possible. So that has helped us to strengthen the network.
Great.
The COVID has good spaces that have helped us to really ride on and be able to strengthen the network. So we just to find a way of how to do this well. Yeah. Then
great. So we will
that,
Hassan, I just wanted to interrupt you here, so that amazing that what you have been learning in Africa region, and we really want to hear more. But also wanted to give some time for Say and Kevin to also share about what they have learned, and you will have time to come back again. So just doing as a conversation. The idea was to make a conversation between three of you. So yeah, who would like to go next? Say, you seem to unmute. You may want to go next. Yeah.
When the Irish Prime Minister announced the first lockdown, he used a phrase that said, "We're all in the same boat." And I've heard it used in other places. And that was a plea for us to get together. But in fact, the reality of the world is that we're not all in the same boat. There are those that are living on the margins, that are more marginalized for lots of different reasons. And whether it is economically, if people that were living in congregated settings, asylum seekers, people in prison, and lots of different people that were homeless, were not in the same boat as the rest of us. In fact, one of the blessings of COVID is that because tourism stopped, Airbnb collapsed, and suddenly there were places available to rent, and the city of Dublin took out leases and moved people off the street. And it was just one of those small blessings that came about. And I just want to mark it because it was kind of amazing. There were people right out on the edge that were included in. And I think within MenEngage Europe, there is also the two boats, if you like, that there are those that have access, there are those that have access digitally, there are those that have less access digitally. There are those who live in safe places and can speak openly online, and those that are fearful about that. I'm thinking of a woman that said, well, I can't discuss that online because my husband, who doesn't have a local passport, would be in danger. And suddenly we're facing the realities of living in constrained, more authoritarian circumstances. So things that were a discussion on LGBTI, perfectly, in my context, perfectly normal and open and easy, but suddenly a woman has to say, well, I can't talk about that. And so that notion of safety online was really significant. Within, again, I mean, the arrival of Ubuntu and our engagement with Ubuntu within Europe actually kind of moved everything up a notch in terms of making things available and bringing things into our consciousness and into our awareness. We had an online membership meeting in February, which was really powerful and really successful. And all of the day-to-day MenEngage Secretariat and Steering Committee and coordination work had been online already anyway, so that was working well. The up out of the Ubuntu sessions came the online backlash and race as two issues that were of particular concern and particular, we had to find ways to work with those, and we still have race and decolonization from a European perspective. As an old white man, I have to find a way to live with that and understand exactly what that means. And Ubuntu has brought that into my head and into my heart, and more across the network, and it's really, really significant. One of the things that we did within MenEngage, monthly we set up what we called a check-in session, which was an open invitation for members just to arrive online without an agenda, to find space to share concerns, worries, triumphs, or whatever. And the meeting started with, so how are you with, how are you with COVID, or how are you just generally? How is your family? So that we got an understanding, and we got a safe space to talk about work that maybe wasn't safe to talk about in other places. And that was really important. Coming out of Sweden and Belgium, they developed a series of sessions around climate change, which was really, really powerful and appropriate that we did those online. That we weren't coming together to add to the problem. We were in fact addressing the problem, and the whole series has been going on there. Other than that, yeah, and those sessions brought in people, young people, and women from outside MenEngage into those conversations, which were really, really powerful and motivating and mobilizing, which was really important. The huge spread of different topics, different themes within Ubuntu really broadened our approach and our thinking, and has left us with significant questions to answer for ourselves in terms of how we move forward. The online radicalization and anti-feminist backlash is something that is in there, but we also found that there was significant knowledge about those areas that we can pull together and work with.
Yeah.
And I think I'll leave it there.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Say. That's quite good additions to what Hashan. And over to you, Kevin. What's been the experience in Caribbean region? What have you learned? What have worked?
Yeah. Thanks, Laxman, and thanks to the other presenters and to Bianca. I really appreciate the way Samita and Craig kicked off the conversation this morning by defining it as a journey. Usually when you think of a symposium is an event. But really COVID forced us to create this journey. And, like Say was just mentioning, we now have this body of learning that forces us now to think beyond, where we usually thought before. There were many advantages to having it online, especially within the Caribbean region. We are a region that's disconnected by water, several islands across this body of water. So, we were to some extent in that virtual space. And like my other colleagues would have mentioned, the symposium presented this opportunity to fine-tune these digital skills and to really empower us to use the technology available to connect and to spread the work and to keep up with what's happening. I mean, however, despite that, there is a digital divide within the Caribbean, with some areas lacking internet access, and also some people without devices and internet. Additionally, one of the bigger challenges for us was the challenge of time. So because most of the events for us fell like smack within the workday, especially within the first half of the workday, there was that concern from others where people would say, I'm interested, but I'm at work, so I can't log in. One of the things that we're doing when we are promoting the recordings now, and encouraging people to go on the YouTube channel so that they can follow the discussions, try to curate some of the content and get it out, especially those that may be more relevant within the Caribbean context. I want to go to something Hassan said. Hassan said it was the symposium really was an opportunity to open doors. And we also experienced that. It really enhanced our visibility as an organization and provided so many opportunities for us to connect with other women's rights organizations and organizations working in this field of gender justice and even environmental justice. So it really put us in a place of building that base of resource persons and building relationships across the region. So that greater visibility appeared, to be one of the pluses for us, because in the region there was this increase in gender-based violence. A lot of persons and organizations called on Kariman to comment, and knowing that there was this broader symposium, it really added credibility to our organization. So we were able to, make that connection with the MenEngage Alliance, and people were able to see, well, wow, there's this global event happening, and if Kariman, this regional organization, and even at the local level, is involved in this, it really adds to our credibility. So the Ubuntu journey, as Samita and Craig picked it off by saying, the Ubuntu journey for us has really, been an opportunity for learning, but it has also challenged us to take the work to a higher level, incorporating the tools, but also appreciating the human connection, because that's one of the things that was missing throughout all of this. As Craig would have mentioned, we became so accustomed to just seeing these boxes with faces, and especially within the Caribbean, where we are just known for that human connection and that human element and infusing everything with culture. That was one thing that a space like Zoom or these platforms are unable to bring, even if we present cultural elements or opportunities for dialogue. So it's really, we're looking, to a future where we can have this blended way of working, where we incorporate digital as well as that human element to ensure that our work is effective. I'll put a pause there for now.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I think, what we are hearing are amazing stories coming out. So yes, despite the COVID that brought up the challenges where we couldn't meet in person, but I think what I really liked on what Craig also shared earlier was that we started in the first, rather than right away going into this technical conversation on transforming masculinities, we started saying, hello, how are you doing? I think that brings a lot of human connections, I guess, more than even if we would have met in person, no? I think that has brought a new way to relate and empathize to where people are and the challenges they are facing. I think I really like that point and really echo that point. I think, that have actually brought kind of, the conversation around masculinity to start with empathy first to relate with, so that we relate with the context, the situation each one of us are in, and recognize that we are all going through a difficult time, right? And we are there to support. So I think that relationship building was quite, that really touched my heart, that we had, this, at least this process. And then having these relationships across the borders, we don't feel anymore like, say, you are in Ireland right now. It looks like we're in the same room, we're talking with each other. It just feels that we are looking at the screen. But then I think if we can see beyond the screen, we are together and we are hearing and feeling the sense. I think that's amazing what you all are sharing, and definitely that helps to address some of the issues that we all will be mentally going through as well. So hearing the stories from different parts. So I think that's that's one of the top things that I really like about this. And should that it had been in person, to what Kevin you are saying, probably we wouldn't have been able to build this relationship and say what you said. The kind of amazing, diverse relationship we have been able to make, if we would have been in person, then it would be very, very limited. And I was counting the number of people who registered, around 6,000 people who registered, and the speakers that we have, around over 300 speakers. That would not have been possible if it was an in-person meeting. So it really opened up the doors. I really, really agree with that. Yes, agree with some of the challenges it brought, and especially for the parts of the world where I am also from, the digital divide is a big issue. So and then new opportunities for reasons. So I'm only highlighting on the positive side. So by the way, just to bring in the positive dimension to this conversation, so that we all feel energized. That I also created our new approaches of rebuilding relationship. But yes, obviously, I think created opportunities for new ways of connecting and building connections and networks at national level, at sub-regional levels, as Hassan was saying, and then also for the global one as well. And I think the last point, and I'll then hand it over to Hassan as well, is the body of learning, the knowledge that has been amazing. Look at the videos that we have been able to pull together, and the conversations, the discourses that are happening is beyond what one could have imagined in terms of the field on men and masculinities 5 years back. In Delhi, it was, we feel Delhi was very, very amazing discourse setup and a milestone. But I think this symposium, with the amount of knowledge and the opportunity for the local people who are doing the work be able to share, has created an amazing platform and a knowledge base for us to really, as a springboard that can really inform the work moving forward. So yeah, anything to add, Hassan, from your side? So we have a couple of minutes before we move to the next one.
Yes. The one thing I wanted to add is that one of the other things that we have learned is that working in the COVID setup has helped us to increase management efficiency. Number one, we have managed to find new ways of constantly staying in touch. And when you are constantly staying in touch, for us who run a regional network of 22 countries, it's quite important that you have a mechanism of instant communication and staying in touch with people to know what's happening, to get quick updates, and also to get quick responses. So that continues to strengthen the network, because we are too close to each other, although we are very far. So that's one of the things that have really come up and are good for the continuous progress of the network, but also being able to strengthen it. And all these things I am talking about, these things did not exist before COVID. They were not there. I just don't know how our brains were thinking that time before COVID to put in place some of these measures. But right now, we realize that this is very effective. It is making management much more easy and easy to stay in touch with people, because human beings, when you don't stay in touch with them, they tend to forget, they tend to lose focus. But with the coming of this technology, like Kevin has said, it has helped us to remain very close to each other and to catch up very fast, get advice from each other, and so on and so forth. Even before this COVID, to be honest with you, we did not have a WhatsApp group for all country chairpersons in Africa. We did not have it. But because COVID came, and we are like, we need to constantly stay in touch with these people to understand what is it going, how are they as country networks managing this COVID. Of course, we needed to communicate that we would like you to restructure your programming and tell us what you want to do as countries increasingly adopt lockdowns. So we realized that we needed a quick communication mechanism. Then we formed a WhatsApp group for all the country chairpersons. So today, when you want to communicate something to country networks, it's just easy. It's a finger snap. I've sent communication to all 22 African countries. So for me, that staying in touch is one of the things that we have seen have come with the COVID, but have really helped in strengthening the network.
Great, thanks, Hassan. Anything to add, Kevin and Say? We have 1 minute probably.
I'd just add that one of my versions of sitting in Zoom is that actually you talk about reaching out from Ireland and across the world, but actually you're coming into my home. And that's a perspective that I take that says about welcome and relationship that is quite different. That the day I hit on that, I changed my relationship with what was happening on screen, and that it said, "Well, here you were with me in here," and that changed how I listened and how I looked and how I am with you. And it changed. It was one of the things that, well, we can't do. You know, you're not going to travel to my home. It's one of the upsides, if you like, of the digital, rather than when we say it's not the same as meeting physically. Well, it's not. But here's an upside that, for me, certainly was quite powerful. And when I mention it, I see smiles and I see recognition. So that's I just offer it as something that is powerful.
Thanks. Final words, Kevin? Anything you want to add? And then
I just want to emphasize, something that Hassan mentioned, and that's the relation building aspect. You know, COVID has really shown us that each moment matters. You know, and I feel like before COVID, like Hassan would say, I don't know how our brains operate, but before COVID, you know, we didn't spend, and you mentioned it too last one, we didn't spend as much time, you know, saying, how are you? And checking in and how's your family and making sure that everything is all right. But, you know, something that Shay mentioned as well was that, you know, oftentimes people lead with their job titles and their organization, and that could be a bit overwhelming and intimidating, and sets up this power differential in relationships. But now with Zoom, you enter people's homes, you know, you enter where they are, you see people in their living rooms, in their family settings, and it really helps break down that bias around these unapproachable organizations of people. So it's really something for us to keep working on, that building of relationships and that reaching out and connecting and staying connected.
Great, thank you. So that's amazing. So then moving on to the next, over to you, Bianca, for the next round of conversation.
Great, thank you. I love that. I think, you know, one of the things that I'm really, and I realize I have this resistance, is I keep thinking I'm terrible at online communication, but it's just a skill that I need to learn. And I think we all need to learn how to feel deeply connected to people, even though we can't physically be with them in person. And for good or bad, it is probably with us to stay. And so it's a valuable skill. I love what Shay said there, just about how you change your perspective and how that then just shifted what it meant for you to show up in these rooms. And so I think that for me, I really resonate with that, because I know that's something that I have had resistance to, that finding that way to feel like this is meaningful connection and learning for the skills that will empower that. So thank you. And then Craig and Samita, so we're basically now, you know, we've talked about, and I can just look at some of the notes. I really think what's come up, the word for me is disparity. So there's this idea that we're all in this together, but the reality is that our in this together looks very different. And what it looks like for me to be in this and for you to be in this is different, and including in terms of network building and our ability to strengthen the work that we're doing, our programs you kept mentioning, Craig. It's not the same in every context. It's not the same with each person. And so we've talked also a little bit about, and I loved also, I think it was Hassan who was referring to this horizontal leadership, and how we had really wanted to focus on the sort of bottom-up mobilization. And so we're learning these lessons about what is working, what's not working. And so the next part is just to, be great to hear from both of you what you think that means in terms of moving forward. So, there is this, sorry, you talk about, there's my kitty cat.
We know each other's pets. We know each other's pets, and then we never did that before.
She loves this camera.
And children, and pets.
Sorry. but just looking at sort of what we've got these lessons learned, and just thinking about how does this now impact us moving forward. So if we're thinking about it's changed the way that we think about things, it's changing the way that we're working, it's changing the skills that we have or that we think we need to acquire. How is that going to impact the initiatives that we're working on in terms of continuing to build these relationships, continuing to take advantage of the things that aren't working, and perhaps those things that are more challenging, thinking of what are the solutions. So I'd like to just hear from both of you around how you think this is going to impact the work moving forward. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, if I may start, Bianca.
Go for it.
Well, let me just talk from South Asia, perspective, because this symposium and the journey actually, as Hassan and Kevin also emphasized, it opened so many doors, and of course we know that we had the challenges that we couldn't grab as much as we wanted to. Especially, that when we actually designed this symposium, one of the main component was that we encouraged the bottom-up mobilization. And of course, we, as much as possible, we tried to manage that from, with the engagement of the country networks. But I wouldn't say that we reached as much as we wanted in terms of doing the bottom-up mobilization, especially because of the kind of digitalization of the whole process and difficulties in reaching out to people in the distant and rural communities. But there are, as Lakshman said, let's talk more of the positive things and more of the positive learnings that we have actually gathered. For South Asia, I think we actually had many in terms of our understanding of men and masculinities, in terms of understanding of MenEngage Alliance, working with men and boys, and engagement with the feminist movement, engagement with youth, young people in the region, engagement with the different intersectional groups, like including LGBTQ communities, working, along with them to achieve our, justice of the aim of social justice. All these things over the past years, we have seen a lot of gaps or a lot of challenges that we couldn't reach up to the level that we wanted to. And like it had been, personally for me, it had been like sometimes a huge reflection when it comes to, just to imagine how much of expertise and how much of knowledge is there itself in the region. And when I see an expert coming from the region and representing a global session, like someone from some expert from a feminist movement in India is coming and talking in a session, it gives me like goosebumps. And I was like, they were there already, all the time, but we couldn't reach up to them. But that was a very good opportunity to get to know who was there out there and who has the knowledge and to whom we should be talking to, with whom that we should build the network and where to find them actually. Just simple as that, but it had been a quite challenge for most of the countries. I know that. I will just take that aspect to the regional roundtables because when we were, the most important thing that had happened is the regional roundtables for me, because it created a lot of opportunities for me to bring all the countries together, all the expertise together for common issues that we have in the region. Because, earlier, although we have the regional network running very smoothly, we were able to at least once or twice a year maximum come together and discuss our issues as the steering committees. But to go beyond the steering committees and bring different expertise into the table to discuss the common issues that South Asia is facing, these regional roundtables actually gave us a lot of opportunities and opened a lot of doors. Because, if you want to bring a speaker, to be very honest, to bring a speaker to a session, you can't just, go and ask a person to come and speak in this forum, right? It has to have a lot of connections with the speaker, a lot of understanding, and that, I mean, even for them, if there is a kind of a suspicion, right? Not if there is no trust within us and the expertise out there who have already been working, we just can't bring them into the table, to talk on behalf of the movement, behalf of the alliance. So it created a lot of engagement just to bring one speaker to the table. I don't need to tell that. I don't know, Bianca, you have that, you and the team would have had that experience, because depending on the number of sessions that we had, 300 odd speakers that had spoken in the sessions, it would have been a nightmare to bring people together. But how much of a learning did that bring, and connection? I think that is also part of the movement building. Because if I want to bring a expert from feminist movement into this panel to represent a South Asia roundtable, I just have to build up my connections, and reach out to them, talk to them, build the trust, and have come to a common understanding and trust each other, especially. So that is the most, I think, the interesting part, more than just speaking in the panel. And I think reaching out to all these people, especially bringing them for the building the kind of creation of the knowledge, and also the connections, and also the different perspectives. All these things, I think, especially the regional roundtables, looking at regional issues, and I know, looking forward, going beyond, there are a lot of things on the table now, that had been created out of these discussions to take forward. And like sometimes it's really challenging personally for me to think that will I be able to manage all this within my regional lifetime, so it's so much of things that we want to do because of the things that had been opened up for the region, and lot of advocacy issues that had been brought by people, that we need to work on those things. And to add to that, the engagement of the young people, that had been quite a gap in South Asia, and within the country networks as well. But with the sessions and the like, we know that more than any other people, young people are very much digitalized. So bringing young people into the discussions and into the table had been not that challenging. Only thing that, again, that trust building and the connection building, the relationship, all those things has to be there. And the same is the LGBTQ community in the region, that being the cultural, with the cultural limitations and the challenges that we have in terms of including, people of the different sexual orientation. But it created a lot of space, a lot of opportunities for us to reach to the communities, to reach to the organizations who are working on these areas, and bring them also into the discussion tables. And of course, we are now planning to, all these knowledge is there now, but the next step is to localize that knowledge, to kind of, we need to have them in local languages. So recently we have been talking about, translating these sessions, writing down them in Sinhala language, or even, even for Sri Lanka and for other countries, to at least to put them into one or two main languages in the country. And also to for people to better understand that we are also trying to, especially when it comes to very, advanced advocacy issues, like, things that had been brought down by the new strategic directions of MenEngage Alliance. We want to find very, how would say, very visualized or very simple ways of translating that to simple language, so that people would understand and put them into practice. So those things are like, there are, I mean, I can talk about a lot of things, but I would stop here because there are a lot of things that can be taken forward in terms of what we have experienced and learned from all these stage, and also the cross-regional sessions where that as you said, we are in different places and we have our different stories, and just to come together and to learn that the other person has a different story is something that gives a lot of reflection. So I think although that it had been quite challenging organizing and all those things, but irrespective of that, these sessions actually brought a lot of issues that we need to take forward.
Wonderful. Thanks, Samita. Craig, do you want to just jump in?
I'd say a few words. Samita, you're talking so much about the what to carry forward from the symposium experience, and the networking and connecting experience. Put these things together has formed so many new relationships, and learn how to do that is a skill for us to grow further. What's going to go forward? I mean, I can't imagine what would be the formats that would bring us back together again. Do we have to start a new symposium? That's another 6 months next year. What is the format that will help us keep doing this in some way? Why would we get together again as a cross-regional conversation? Why would we do this? Shay's idea of a monthly open conversation check-in, on some basis, maybe whatever frequency may be valuable for us. We're having structured conversations today, but what would it be like to have an unstructured conversation? It would be different for us, but it's something to perhaps try. The idea of, the learning to hold on to the sense of empathy and care for each other's health all around the world and in every meeting sounds very valuable. It will drift away as we're less concerned. My job is this, and here's what we're going to do. I need to know that, and that's it. I think that will not be easy to hold on to, as it is. But I think that's something to look forward to, and how to refine our use of these tools. The idea of multiple languages and how we respond to multiple languages. I find that I'm very Colin. I'm very, it's all English all the time. In the U.S. and Canada, there are multiple languages, and we will need to challenge ourselves to be more to promote more accessible nature with regard to that here. I think that we have a certain privilege set that we're operating in that is really quite secondary to do multiple language work. In Spanish, perhaps there are organizations in our membership that is very careful to put Spanish in equal footing to English. But it doesn't go further, but there are many language groups in the U.S. And the digital divide question, I've been thinking about as it was brought up by Hassan in particular, that what do we do about that? How do we, if we're going to continue focusing on the importance of our online connections going forward as a worldwide group and as regional groups, that geography is a challenge, how do we support difficult access to internet connections? Is it a fund? Do we help support a fund that locals can use that will specifically help with digital connections of members? Maybe it's a very specific channel that will help. Maybe I imagine that could be like a bottle. It could be endless, the amount of funds you put into such a resource. But maybe in a targeted way, it would be valuable. In a very specific way, it could be really valuable. And it's I don't know what else one does to help, because equipment, it's paying for the time, these pay-as-you-go kind of experience. I know that I have connections, and there's parts of the world that really aren't with us. Armenia, in that part of the world, I have some personal associations with folks in Armenia that are doing this work. Particularly gender-based violence kind of interaction work and gender justice work in Armenia. And internet is pay-as-you-go. By and large, in the public, there's some similarities to that conversation in lots of parts of the world. And how does one do it? You know, is the internet cafe experience? How do we bring up that piece? You know, to the theme that we've been working on of what is intersectionality and what is decolonization. What does it mean in practical terms? And you know, COVID itself brought that to the fore in certain specific ways, but it's true across the board. How do we be aware of those matters, and you know, and who's at the table, and how do these conversations happen? And as practical things as when do you pay your bills, and how quickly do you pay your bills? You know, can a speaker you know, when, you know, can they need to be paid right away or can they wait? Is a question of the first world, second world, third world position, you know, and so it's there's these matters of are really important, and I really have valued the opportunity to consider those questions in a kind of a broader perspective. And you mentioned storytelling. Storytelling is so part of that. Like, here's what our experience actually is. You can hear it. This is what it actually is. It's not, you know, we won't have to pretend. We don't have to try to make it up. But here's our story, and how can we help each other along? You know, I think that's been really valuable, and I hope that that theme continues going forward. And how do we do this? You know, and so it's and when we finally have an opportunity, I suppose they are coming around through certain mechanisms to rise in a single voice for something. We'll be there to be able to do that. So those are my points.
Fabulous. Thank you, Craig. Smita, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. Well, if you ask me what else I would want to take forward from the symposium, Bianca, the one thing that I would really want to do again and again is the engagement with the inner work and self-care, because that had been like, you know, with people so much exhausted with the COVID, and, you know, so much being pressed, and I mean, like, overwhelmed, right? Even recently, I mean, just to bringing one example from my own, you know, work environment, we as an organization working in the rural areas, there had been a lot of domestic violence issues that had been coming up, and of course, it had been actually too much for our district coordinators to handle. They were really exhausted. People started calling them even in the middle of night, and you know, because they had no other way of you know, putting that stress out, and we actually had to take certain decisions with regard to our own staff. Where is your line? You know, that where you need to draw the line, and sometimes take care of your own self, because they sometimes actually didn't have answers to those questions, or the, you know, solutions to all those things that is coming up. You know, it's the issues were so much interconnected, the COVID situation and their day-to-day basic needs, and the domestic violence, the children's issues with not going back to school, and, you know, like, so many issues were coming up. So it's really important that our members, our, you know, organizations really start thinking about having self-care policies for the organizations, which actually we are now thinking that we really need to have, and of course think more and more and discuss more and more about our own people who are looking after others. So that is something that is so much close to my heart, and which I would want to do kind of, you know, in the future again and again, and find ways, as Craig also said, we need to find resources, we need to find finances, and we need to find expertise to handle and, you know, engage in these kinds of work as well.
Right, thank you. I think what stands out the most is this idea of we need to create these cultures of care. Like, one of the things that COVID really brought us, and it's true, I mean, I remember when it first started in March last year, we'd always start our team meetings with "How are you?" Like an actual, really, "How are you?" And then it's so easy for these things to fall away because life moves on and we go back into our everyday world. But we're wanting to create, as part of the work that we're doing as MenEngage, is to create these cultures of care, and how important that is for us to do that within our own lives, within our own organizations, and then of course more broadly as the Alliance. And so taking forward some of this inner work and as part of the journey. Sorry, I don't want to go on too long, but I feel like one of the things that you said, Craig, that really, for me, sort of summarizes this whole experience we've all kind of been through. You said we should at least try. And I feel like that's been what COVID has given us, is that willingness to go, no idea what I'm doing, but let's give it a go, you know. And we're so, it can be really challenging for us to think like that. And yet we have really been forced in so many ways over this past year and something to try new things. And we don't have a choice, so we just do it. And I think also holding on to that. So, you know, like we think, how do we keep these conversations going? Well, we need to at least try. How do we keep the care up? We need to at least try. We need to keep trying and finding those ways that are going to work for all of us. And then when I just think that, you know, one of the questions here is just about where have we reached our vision? And I think it's interesting. I think the vision of this in-person event, this vision of bottom-up mobilization, etc., that we initially had, as you say, in February last year, to where we are today, it's been so different. And now we're left with a lot of questions. And I think it's enriched us, actually. So I think where we've reached the vision is kind of in that we have been opened up, and our horizons have been broadened, our ability to connect has been broadened. And so in a way, I feel like we've actually surpassed our vision, because the vision is to create this connected alliance of people that will, as you said, Craig, rise with one voice, something like that, on important issues. And I think, yes, that's really where we're going. So how do we keep this momentum and this energy going? And just to say, from the Secretariat perspective, these are also the questions that we're asking. So we're not going to end this call in like 30 minutes and be like, okay, cross-regional sessions are done. We are really asking these questions and thinking about how we can keep these conversations and the momentum and the energy and the connection, which I think is the most important thing going. So before we jump over to Lakshman and the other group, do you want to say anything else, either of you?
Well, I'll add, what you said about the cultures of care is antidote to hegemonic masculinities. It is a practice that helps men learn their ways of being from children to adults, that they've learned to be stoic and separate, and not connecting that way is vulnerability. So learning to bring that to a natural everyday place is antidote process to that. Oh, look at your tail of your cat. That this is,
you know, sorry.
It's all right. This is you know, a practice that we're all experiencing in a way by accident, but also on purpose. That there's a process of I'm just saying that left to our quote our own devices as male identified people, we won't do it unless we have had already a introduction and an experience that brings it to importance, I suppose. And I hold it as high regard as strength. I know other male identified folks hold it as low regard as weakness. So that's the point I'm making about that practice. I just want to mention that. It's an important practice.
Great, thank you. Mita, anything else just before we hand over to Lakshman and the rest of the speakers?
I'm good, Bianca.
You're good. Okay, great. Yeah. So Lakshman, I'm going to hand over to you and Kevin and Shay and Hassan. We'll come back.
Yeah. So yeah, college, if you can spotlight. So yeah, continuing on that, you know, we wanted to we heard, you know, some of the things around the learning and insight from the initiatives to strengthen the network, and whether or not we have achieved the vision. Any reflections from your side, and also Hassan, if he is still with us? Yeah, he is there. Okay. Anyone who would like to start? Go ahead, say.
I remember hearing the word Ubuntu and how it had risen up out of the meeting in Kigali as the kind of by acclamation as the focus of the what this was going to be about. And I had to learn what that meant, and I worked a bit with Tom on the development of the branding and things like that. And during that time, I actually internalized what Ubuntu meant for the first time. I'd heard the word once before, but in this instance, suddenly the idea of Ubuntu became very, very real, and it became absolutely understood by me as to what it meant. I am because you are, and that bespeaks connection, and it bespeaks the humanity, and relationship. And I think in that case, the vision has exploded. That these relationships have become real, and I am sitting here because you are sitting there, and I think it's very, very real, and it has been made real to 3,000 plus people who sat in one session or another and heard each other in a way. And when we say there is a phrase in Ireland that a salutation, which is "How are you?" In our work with men, we say the first question you ask is "How are you?" But listen to the answer, because normally we just pass on. It's just a salute. So that listen to the answer and "How are you?" brings that Ubuntu right down to the ground in our day-to-day place. And I think I'm absolutely with Craig on this in terms of contradicting our old ways of masculinity. It brings us face to face as just between men as men and not in competition, and in good relationship with the women and other folks in our lives. I think it is so very important how that has been demonstrated right throughout all of these sessions.
Right. So, okay. Yeah, absolutely. And the reality of the world today, and when we talk about digital divide, so Jose Alfredo just sent a message saying the system of the internet system broke down in the place where he lives, so he's not able to connect with us today. So yeah, just wanted to acknowledge that on behalf of Jose Alfredo. Yeah. Kevin, Hassan.
So I can come in here, Maxman. So one of the big learnings for me, and something that I would take forward, is we live in a digital world. We have known that before COVID. So there is this need that our digital strategies and tools are really cutting edge. Ubuntu is an amazing universal principle, but I feel like unless we could really capitalize on social media, capitalize on digital strategies, a lot of people will remain unconscious of it. Only people working in the field will get to or will tap into our work. So what I'm saying is, while there's all this great content from the Ubuntu Symposium, several dialogues and lectures and discussions that are 1 hour, 2 hours long, the average person is not going to just log on and sit and listen to a 1 hour. So how are we going to develop these digital communication assets, that capture their attention, that open the door for them to go and join this 1 hour session? How are we developing assets that, or how are we influencing these social media algorithms, for example, to bring our message and the work that we are doing to the top? So I think that's an important thing for us to really hone in and to really not settle when it comes to digital strategies and communication tools, but really strive for the best and the most cutting edge in order to balance the great message that we have of gender equality and gender justice with tools that really bring it to people. In the Caribbean, we have launched the Men's Pledge, for example, and that really calls on men to take responsibility to ending violence against women and girls. And interestingly, in Trinidad, when it was launched, our biggest supporters were actually politicians and people who work in local government. And that's because the tools we use and the platforms we use got into the spaces where they are, you know? And it's really a starting point now. So those were just very catchy things. But now it opens the door for us to have a broader conversation with them and to introduce them to the work. And I'm thinking, had we just tried to introduce them to the work, they may not have paid us mind. But we utilize some of these strategies, invested in developing the assets, and it really reaps some dividends there. So I think that's a big learning. Another thing we have noticed, and this is generally because of COVID-19, there has been this increase in the Caribbean of these spaces where people express a lot of hate and misogynistic views and sexist views. And there are a lot of these pockets some of these pockets across the Caribbean. And I think there is that need. There has always been these calls to, to take these people off and get them off these sites. But, when I look at case studies of extremist groups like in North America and in Europe, for example, what you have happening when you push people with those views to the fringes is that they go underground and they form even more dangerous groups. So we have been thinking a lot about how can we not tolerate it, but how can we maintain that engagement within these open spaces, because it's open spaces. And once it's open spaces, I guess we could moderate it, we could monitor it, we can influence it, So how do we keep that going and not expect that, okay, let's just purge all our spaces of all these hateful comments, not realizing that when we move these people off, it's not that their views change, but just they find darker and more hidden areas to coalesce and build that dangerous movement. Craig raised an important point about the multiple languages. And for us in the local chapter in Trinidad, began exploring working with the deaf community, and I think that's a like a huge area where there are these plans to translate a lot of the work into sign language and develop some workshops that we could collaborate on, even include sign language interpreters on our Zoom calls and forums. So I think that's an area for us to continue developing, multiple languages, understanding the needs of different groups of people, and developing our strategies around that as well.
Amazing. Yeah, Hassan.
Yes. For me, I'm looking at the work for transforming masculinities and how the symposium presented quite a diversity of this work, the versatility of this work. We're hearing things from this symposium that many of the colleagues in the African continent did not know about the work of engaging men and boys. For example, masculinities and climate change. Okay. Then we go into militarized masculinities. Okay. So the discussion now is, so does that mean that to strengthen our network and to strengthen the work that we are doing, we also need to look into those areas and see how we create partnerships for continued learning. For example, the issue of climate mitigation and how we can work with masculinities in climate mitigation. This is an area where there can be huge potential for the work that we do on the African continent. But this is not an area that was previously, before Ubuntu, a focus for MenEngage Africa, climate mitigation. That was not the focus, okay? Militarized masculinities. And now there's something that has come with the Africa hosting the Ubuntu Symposium is that there are platforms that hitherto were hard for us to jump into. Platforms at the African Union, for example, were hard to jump into. But the organization of the Ubuntu Symposium has opened up some doors. The other day we got an invitation for a high-level dialogue on silencing the guns. It is one of the ambitions of African Union by 2030, silencing the guns. So we realize that now there are spaces that we are getting into because the symposium opened up a wide range of topics where work with men and boys can be an intervention. So now we are thinking to ourselves and saying, okay, how do we take this forward? How do we also continue the learning from the Ubuntu Symposium and be able to get into these spaces and build a community of practice, but also build a body of knowledge around climate mitigation in Africa, around conflict and peace and, silencing the guns. How do we continue with that process? Because then we are getting into even more spaces and getting more visibility with the work of transforming men and masculinities. So the Ubuntu Symposium for us now, we're like, okay, how do we take this forward? This online thing has been good, never mind the challenges of connectivity. But then we're already discussing the MenEngage Africa Symposium that we have been having periodically. How do we learn from the Ubuntu Symposium so that we're able to sustain this discussion over a period of time? Because the length of the Ubuntu Symposium also acts to keep the discussion, the language around men and boys into practice, into the practice. The length of the symposium has really enabled this discussion to continue, especially amidst COVID. So the discussion around working with men and masculinities, patriarchal masculinity, it has intensified, maybe because of how long the symposium has been online. So you keep the buzz. People keep talking about the need to transform patriarchal masculinities. So then we are like, okay, we need to learn from this Ubuntu Symposium and take this forward, but also be able to open up new areas of our work to learn new knowledge on some of these things. So also the other thing that we want to, and the reason why we want to take forward the online thing is that we have discovered that for some particular targets of speakers, if you needed them for a physical meeting, you would be required to make a booking of like 3 months before if you need a particular speaker. But then we realized if it is online, you need less of that time. Somehow those people who had restrictions on when they should be booked, loosen down on these restrictions and you can get them to speak. Since it is online, they're not moving anywhere. They would say, I'll be able to give you 1 hour. I'll be available to talk, but it will be only for 1 hour. So it is also opening up previous restrictions of people, because previously you have to book a particular person 3 months ahead because they have a very busy schedule, because everything was about physically being there. But now this is something we want to take forward, because then it helps us get some key resource persons. We're able to get them to participate in our conversations.
Absolutely. I think in terms of, then what does the intersectionality mean in reality is actually building relationships and interconnecting with intersectional movements would be one way to look at, and then with whom we would not have built relationship and discussions and have a space shared to have the conversation on how they look at the work on men and masculinity. And I think that on in itself is something that we can really look at how and what the intersectionality mean. And then while we relate and connect with those works, how can we do it in a humble manner and in an accountable manner? Because I think, what we don't want is to again reinforce the same I can't hear you. Are you all hearing me well?
You're very faint. It's not the same as it was.
Okay. Let me see if I can be little. Is it better? Yeah. Okay. So I think in terms of looking forward on the intersectionality is also to sort of ground to where our members' realities are, right? So I think we need to improve how do we then connect with what our members are doing at the ground level, so that the decolonization model then becomes that somebody who is in the power position or a leadership role or in a global space becomes dominant in defining what the agenda will be. So it then becomes a horizontalizing this discourse and decision making, and then be more inclusive. I think that's more, the way we can look at operationalizing and making practical elements in this space, and also reach out to people who we, are not generally in the spaces we are in, or don't generally tend to join and hear these conversations, and invite them to engage more work. And also, I think also the knowledge base. Where is our root of the knowledge? So I think that's an important element to also look at from decolonization perspective, is to think about the building onto the knowledge of our own members in the ground, so that we connect with the lived realities there. So I think that's an important concept, and how to continue using this kind of online platforms to continue the conversation and discourse, which is very much needed. And that's some direction that we are heading towards as well from the Global Secretary with the new strategic plan, is to continue creating these spaces and support our reasons to continue building those spaces as are relevant for you as well. So I think we need to look at how can we open up these spaces, and also think more practically on to the point what Craig was raising earlier, and how do we facilitate our colleagues, and also the Hassan, you raised that, some of our members, if I was not based in the US, I would not have been able to continuously pay for my internet connection to join as I'm doing right now, because it's expensive, and the colleagues who are in the space don't have capacity to have or cannot purchase the internet connectivity as where we are. So I think to constantly be more strategic on how do we then facilitate such and such processes, something to think of. So now I'm being a little concerned about the time we have. So probably we can, sorry to, not allowing, say, Kevin and Hassan to come back again, but you all three can continue, so that we can all have Craig as well and Samita as well to join now, to have a joint conversation on, if you can share, now that we heard many things from, and you all shared so many amazing ideas, and that we will also take into consideration on some of the plans moving forward from the Global Secretariat side as well, and work with you individually as regional leaders at the moment, but the other leaders in your regions as well, to sort of put together a structure. So if you have to, and probably, invite Bianca as well here. So if you have to say one thing that stood out from the conversation today to you, that you think is absolutely important for your reason moving forward, what would that be?
If I may start, I think I remember once at some place we discussed that, Lakshman, it's how important it is to put our own houses in order. And that had been something, was very relevant even for now. And with the strategic directions and the points put forward by the discussion paper that was discussed in a series of discussions, there are a lot of things that that we really need to reflect upon as a regional secretariat, as country secretariats, and also by each member. So that would be, I mean, of course we can bring all the other things into that whole aspect. If I mean, you just asked me just one word, but let me say that putting our houses in order is still a challenge, and that would be one of the priorities for South Asia.
I'll say a word is about promoting connection. You know, it is about connection. And so promoting connection in every way, finding ways for that to be successful, to engage. And so that's what I take away. There's so many ways to do that, whether it's our own local leadership, but we need to promote connection.
For me, and I will build on Samita, it's that inner work. In the past, you know, it was considered an achievement when people signed up to be part of the movement, only for later on to find out that, oh, we have different views on many core things. You know, we're not asking that everybody agree the same thing, but I believe that there are some things that are non-negotiable, especially around the work of equality. So spending time to make sure that people commit to that personal transformation when they sign up to be part of the movement, that inner work, or as Samita put it, ensuring that our house is in order.
Yes, I think for me, I'll take away, there are quite many, but let me zero down on the one of, which one do I choose? I like the one that Kevin talks about, inner work. It's a big challenge. We still need to reflect on that. But I want to take away the issue of accountability, the issue of dealing with the backlash, especially the region where we are. We have to deal with backlash in the work that we do almost on a daily. But dealing with backlash for me is not the main thing, but how you overcome the process of managing this backlash and you continue to reflect in the true picture of an ally. And this is an art. It's an art that we'll need to learn. How do we interface with this backlash, but also remain allies as we deal with the issues around backlash? So for me, that's what I take away. And it's one of the running themes where we are at the MenEngage Africa Annual General Meeting, the issues of true allyship. How do we deal with that in a growing face of backlash? That's it for me.
It's less coming from today, but around the backlash, where I've been thinking a lot and talking a lot about it, and various conversations have said that, well, particularly the young men who are isolated and end up as performing the backlash online, that's a journey where they are coming out of isolation and finding belonging in that space. I believe our challenge is actually to step in and offer them something that they can belong to, that is not that misogynistic backlash, but that it builds community and builds capital and connection. You know, that for 25 years, that is the work that I have been doing face to face. And probably 5 or 6 times in those 25 years, I have sat with what I used to call angry men, I now call dangerous men, and sat and to discover what it is that is driving them. And I believe the deep motivation that is driving them is isolation and looking for belonging. It's abandonment and looking for belonging. And I do believe there is a path. I don't know what it is, but I do believe there is a path which we can make that interrupts that journey for some of them or more of them. And it's something that I feel really deeply strongly about. I spent 30 years before this work creating marketing and advertising campaigns, which were around politics, around all kinds, around campaigns, And it was always about stripping back and finding some core that actually said, well, where are we working? And I believe in this case, that's where we're working. That's what we need to do. Find a path in to create. And I do believe also in terms of what Kevin was saying about what do we do with all of this work that we now have. And I think that's part of it. It is that we begin to promote all of that knowledge that we have. If I think about the power of TED Talks, that so we have a MenEngage thing that actually we can lead people to. Those are Jangel's thoughts, but I think they're coming from a really basic, fundamental insight that says we can interrupt this path. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think extremely relevant. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with your points that you raised as well. But yeah, I think, yeah, and all of these things is something that we really want to move forward with, so that we can be more constructive in the work that we do, the relationships we build, but also looking at, particularly the backlash came as an important piece here, but also to clarify when we understand backlash, probably the way I understand is slightly different than the critique of the work with men and boys by feminist groups. So just to make sure that is not coupling up in terms of confusing what actually the backlash is. So the criticism from the feminist movement is not really a backlash for me, but rather a concern that they have with the way the work with men and boys is being produced and reproduced in a particular way that does not resonate with some of them, or the way they understand the intersectional feminist movement and approach is all about. But I think the backlash is something that we really have to, let's continue this conversation, Hassan, on what is the best strategy, and building on to your experience, say, and others as well. And I know Samit and you all are also, and Craig, you all have done amazing work on some of the challenging the backlash in North America region. And Kevin, you are now thinking exactly on how to do that and be better. The same case for Latin America region. They have been thinking about that for quite some time now. But I think, I'm sure we will be able to come up with a collective strategy on what is the best way to take this agenda forward. But I think how can we infuse that as a part of the networks building and strengthening, because that's one of the key aspects that the backlash group generally apply. And these young people that Say is referring to, it's part of the networks building, trust building with these young people so that they become so strong up to the level, that they are even ready to give or take others' life. So I think what is that we need to learn from that? Something. Yeah, anything to add, Bianca, from your side, and then rounding off the conversation as well.
Yeah, I think we can. I think for me, the key takeaway actually is really around the knowledge. Like, we've just created so much knowledge through these 7 to 8 months. And even just within your regions, Hassan, you were talking about the local symposiums that were happening in all the African countries, and like, how do we access all of that knowledge that's been created, and then how do we share that? And so and then Samita, actually what you had said, it felt like what you were saying is the knowledge is in the regions. And so it's really, I think, thinking about how we access this information, how we harness this information, and how we find ways to share it with different communities. I think one of the things I'm really hearing is it's not just, and we do say this a lot, but I feel like I've really heard it quite strongly today, it's not just about communicating with ourselves. So if we're creating documents that are great for our sector, that's one thing. But if we're creating work that's going to influence, I think, Kevin, you've used that word a few times, and I think that's important. We're wanting to influence change. We're wanting to create and spark new ways of being. We're wanting to offer alternative spaces of belonging, connection, etc. And so really looking at how we take all of this knowledge that's kind of there and and some of it that's in the regions that still needs to be tapped into and somehow brought to the fore. But how do we do that in ways that makes it more accessible to those beyond our circles? So for me, that's a really key takeaway that I think is something that we can look at. And I know that, as Lakshman is saying, I mean, these are things that are being thought of, and this conversation will continue beyond today, as you all know. So this is it's almost like this is a stepping stone into what the next thing will be, and we'll have to figure out what that looks like. But yeah, that would be my key takeaway. And then do you want me to close it up now, Lakshman? We are, great. Okay, so then I'm just going to close this off. I really, all I want to do is thank all of you. It has been such an incredible journey. This is the word of the symposium. It was not an event, it was a journey. And this journey has been truly amazing. And I think for me personally, made amazing just by these connections and this group. And not just the ones that are here, but all the regional coordinators and how you've really helped us to shape this symposium. And it's been just such a joy and a pleasure to connect with you, all of you. And so we're very grateful for that, very much looking forward to taking the discussions further. And then thank you, just for the great conversation. I think what it leaves us with is a lot of action points. And I think that's wonderful. I think ending this symposium with a bunch of action points is an absolute win, because I think that was the main goal, is that when we came out of this, it's not like we just have all these talks and then, okay, it was, what are we going to do? And we have so many action points, and that actually excites me. And I feel like there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement within the group as well. So really just looking forward to continuing to work with all of you. And again, a big thank you for not just for this discussion, but for all of your support over the last 7 to 8 months as we've rolled out this journey of the symposium. So that's all coming up next week, and then we head up to our closing. So please, if you haven't registered, register, share it with all your networks, everyone you know, and let's try and get as many people. We're hoping this is going to be a great celebration, a very forward-looking 4-hour session, and that's going to launch us into the next few years. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you all online again soon, and thank you to all the speakers, Lakshman, to everyone. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
So much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Take care.